Good evening, everyone. It's Shelley and Ross and Emery here for our very first Tuesday night book club on Zoom. So thank you for joining us, Emery. And our presenter is actually going to be Ross, who's read this book how many times?
More than once.
More than once. And do you want to hold it up so everyone can see what it is? So this is Change Your Paradigm, Change Your Life by Bob Proctor. And we're going to read it chapter by chapter each week. So let's get started.
All right.
And I encourage you to take notes as Ross is reading.
All right. So just what is a paradigm? At its most basic level, a paradigm is a mental program situated in your subconscious that has almost exclusive control over all your habitual behavior, and almost all your behaviors are habitual. Paradigms are a multitude of habits passed down from generation to generation, and they manifest themselves in many ways. Paradigms are the way you view yourself, the world, and opportunity. They are how you approach change and challenge. Once you realize that all your behavior is controlled by paradigms, the way you look at your entire world will change. So perhaps you know someone who seems habitually angry, upset at every turn in life, and able to see the positive in any situation. Maybe you know someone who has battled fluctuating weight for years or decades. They seem to be on track for a while, getting healthy and dropping pounds, but they always seem to bounce back to where they once were. Perhaps you know someone who seems to be stuck at a certain level of income for years and can never seem to break through to the next level. All of these outcomes are controlled by paradigms. Just as paradigms can be a prison of one's making, they can also be changed to deliver you the freedom to be exactly the person you want to be. Can I move on?
Yep.
So that was the forward to explain what a paradigm is. So the first chapter is called Your Awesome Power to Change. So this is going to be an incredible book for some of you. Why didn't I say all of you? Because I want to stress the vital importance of making a decision to change your life. You decide if it's going to be you. Changing your paradigm takes a committed decision because it goes in the opposite direction of nearly everything we've been taught. We go to school, take a book, read it, ask questions on the material, and then go on to another book. The truth is we can't possibly understand the contents of the book this way. Reading something once and moving on is not going to do it. So yes, I have read this book. I'm currently, if I count this as reading, in the 29th reading of this book.
It's pretty cool. Almost know it off by heart.
Pretty well. And for a while there, I was reading it every single day, reading a chapter every day. And because I've gone on to another book, I probably don't read this as much, but I do flip back to it from time to time because I'm doing exactly the same thing with a different book at the moment. So our paradigm was built through repetition, constant spaced repetition, and that's the way it's going to be changed. But this makes little sense to most people. They're relating to the way they've been and the way they were educated in the past when they weren't really being educated at all. They were merely gathering information. You'll see people with very impressive degrees from prestigious universities who are struggling through their life. They don't have enough money. They don't hold down a good position. If they have their own company, they go bankrupt or go out of business. You think they're so smart. How could this possibly happen? The truth is they're not very smart at all. They've gathered a lot of information, but they don't use it. And that's probably a lot of our problems a lot of the time. We read stuff, we gather information, but we actually don't put half of what we learn into practice. Their behavior is controlled by their paradigm, not by the information they get. They're not doing what they know how to do. For some strange reason, they never figure it out. They never stop and analyze their own behavior in relation to what they know. So success in any undertaking totally depends on what's going on inside of our minds. It's got nothing to do with what's going on the outside. So some people do extremely well, even in the face of bad economic conditions. Even during the Great Depression, not everyone was out of work. Not everyone was broke. Some people did very well, earning millions of dollars. Why did they do very well? What was going on? Why did a few people win? They built their success in their minds. It has to come from the inside out, not from the outside in. We're being controlled by our outside world. because we've been trained that way. We've been programmed to let the outside world control us. So the next section in here is called paradigms and habits. So just thinking positively isn't going to do it. It's an illusion. It takes a change in paradigm, and a paradigm is a multitude of ideas that are fixed in our subconscious minds. Ideas that are fixed in our subconscious mind are known as habits. A paradigm is a multitude of habits that are fixed in our subconscious mind. A habit is an idea that expresses itself without any conscious thought. You just automatically move. You drive your car primarily by habit. You don't think to do it because you've been programmed. If you objectively observe your own behavior for 2 or 3 hours from the time you get up in the morning, you'll see that most of your behavioral patterns are not going to give you the success you desire. Then you have to ask yourself, why am I acting this way? Every day you do the same things because you're programmed to do them. We're programmed to live the way we're living. First of all, we're programmed genetically. That's why we look like our relatives, but it's built right into our genes at birth. Each of us is the confluence of a genetic pool that goes back for many generations. It controls us. It controls everything we're doing. A person's paradigm has nothing to do with what they learned in school. If a person has a bad paradigm, they're going to lose, even if they have a great education. Their education has got nothing to, is not going to help them.
So we're saying the habits are generational.
Habits are generational. Right? You think about it. Your children copy what you do. They don't do things because you tell them to do. They do things because of what they see you do. They copy what you do into some degree. They have their own brain and process, but they still copy what you do.
So this is about breaking generational habits and generational paradigms that are passed down through.
Yeah. So first of all, we have to understand how a paradigm is formed. Then we have to understand how it's changed, and that is something most people do not understand. All right, so the next section is called unconscious competence. So obviously there's bits and pieces I'm only reading the underline, but I'm pretty well reading most of the book, right?
There's a chart with this sort of stuff on it, isn't there? I've seen this before.
Yes, there is. But it's not in this book though. All right. So this is Bob Proctor's talking here. I started to check almost everything I was raised to believe, and I found that most of it wasn't true. Can one person be better than someone else? No. No one is any better than anybody else. Their results may be a little bit better. They may earn more money. They may be more productive. They may be able to run faster, but they're all exactly the same. If you look at all of us and put us into a fire, took all of us and put us into fire, we're all going to be reduced to the same level, where mass, energy, and vibration, color, size, gender don't mean anything. We're all the same. We've got to realize we are all subject to the laws that are exact. They don't change. They weren't made by men, so men are not going to change them. Our success is going to depend on our understanding and our ability to bring our lives into harmony with these laws. So then we're going to move down to this next section is called developing an awareness. We have, as a people, become obsessed with the development of the intellect, and we ignore the development of awareness. Awareness is the key. We want to become aware. The more aware we become, the more it's reflected in our results. A lack of awareness is also reflected in our results. So you become what you think about. And the more you look into that idea, the more profound it becomes. So but then you say it further here, we put the brakes on ourselves through how we choose our thoughts. We have to start by understanding that there's only one part of the universe that we can change, and that is ourselves. We can change nothing else. We can't change the conditions or the circumstances around us. We have to adapt to what's going on and keep going. But we also have to understand that we are bigger than the external situations that we're facing. I really don't give those things a lot of time. because they pass and something else will come. There's always something outside that will control us if we let it. I don't choose to let it. I'm in control of me. It's not just what we think, it's what we internalize, because you can think something without internalizing it. You've got to internalize these thoughts. You've got to emotionalize them, or they're not going to do you any good. If you
emotionalize your thoughts.
Emotionalize your thoughts. If you keep them on a conscious level alone, you can be thinking of wealth and live in poverty. If you haven't internalized the thoughts of wealth, you're going to stay in poverty. So the future must become the present in the imagination of the one who has wisely and consciously created the circumstances.
The future
must become the present in the imagination of the one who has wisely and consciously created circumstances. All right.
Yep.
We've been given mental faculties that no other form of life has been given. All the other little creatures in the world are completely at home in their environment. They blend in. We're totally disorientated because we've been given the mental faculties to create our environment.
So basically, instead of thinking that you don't have any control of the circumstances and the circumstances are controlling you, you actually need to flip it, and you need to use your wisdom and awareness to create your own circumstances and be in control of them.
As much as possible. All right. So memory, perception, will, reason, imagination, intuition. These are phenomenal powers, but do we understand how they work? When you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. So that was by Wayne Dyer, author Wayne Dyer. If you change your perception, you change your world. We've got perfect memory. We've got perfect intuition. All of our higher faculties are perfect. They need developing, but we're not even taught we have them. So we're not taught how to use them. The imagination is not just something to play with. Everything we see, the world around us, was first created in the imagination and then turned into physical results. The world operates by law. And when you really think about that, the beanie that you got on your head, Anne-Marie, somebody had to think of it. Had to think of it.
Well, that must have been cold, so they thought, yeah, put that
that's correct. But somebody still had to think of it.
Yeah.
The laptop we're using at the moment, the light that's in the room, somebody had to think of it. You know what I mean? So that's sometimes what we don't always recognize is somebody still had to think of it first. How do I make this better? How do I improve this? Whatever it may have been, somebody could have come up with a basic idea and improved on it, but still someone had to go through a thought process to create everything that's around us.
Imagine though, if you taught this at school from a young age where people knew.
Well, he talks about that in his book a lot. Yeah.
What the schooling system would be, what the world would be like, the children coming out of a schooling system, but totally believing in that and knowing how to do it at a young age, what the world could actually be like.
Yeah, correct. Well, I'll read this section because I don't have it underlined, but I'll say aerospace engineer Werner von Braun put it very well. When John Kennedy asked him what it would take to build a rocket that would carry a person to the moon and then bring them back safely to Earth, von Braun answered, the will to do it. What it comes down to, using your will and your imagination.
He's saying we're not even taught. We're not taught that we've got the perfect memory and intuition.
No, we're not.
We're actually, so we've already got them, but we're not actually taught that we have them. So then we're not taught how to use them.
Correct.
Like to use them to their full potential.
Yeah. When you focus on one idea, that idea must move into form. As Andrew Carnegie observed, any idea that's held in the mind, that's emphasized, that's feared or revered, will begin at once to clothe itself in the most convenient and appropriate form available. One of the first laws of the universe is the perpetual transmutation of energy. Energies are forever moving into form, through form, and back out of form. And if you think about it, when you're afraid of something that actually hasn't happened yet. If you really think about it, hasn't happened. If I think about fear and creativity, when you're afraid of something that is actually not physically happening. It still hasn't. It may be about to occur, but it actually hasn't occurred.
Yeah, false expectations appearing real.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. That's what it is.
Yeah.
But why can't we struggle to flip it the other way?
Yeah.
We're afraid of the dark until you turn a light on, but we're afraid of the dark. We're afraid of something that hasn't actually occurred. There's nothing physically. It's not like I'm being cut at that time. Now, sure, there's a fear of I'm burning if I'm sitting in a fire. I get I'm burning, I'm sitting, but it's actually physically happened. I'm no longer afraid. If I'm actually burning, I'm no longer afraid because I'm actually burning. I'm now in pain. I've moved from the fear to the actual event. But we all struggle to flip, and I big hand up with that 1%, flip the switch and go, well, why can't I be more creative, positive expectations on the opposite side of that? Because they're exactly the same thing. Neither of them we can see. They're both things that we're creating in our minds to start with. Yes, the fear thing could come true. Yes, I'm falling off a cliff. Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to fall off a cliff. All right, I'm now falling off a cliff. I'm no longer afraid. I'm now afraid I'm going to hit the ground. Sure, I appreciate that. But in most cases, the fear is not real.
Of course, I see it. Of course, I see it.
I'm trying to talk to myself. Why do you think I've read this book so many times for? Because I understand it. I still struggle with it because if you put this out to anybody that's going to listen to this, we as a human being have created our environment and we are so afraid of the things around us, more so than the opposite side of that. Our instant brain capacity goes to self-protection, which creates fear. That's what it does. All the
I
time.
suppose that's why when I see a spider, I go the opposite direction.
Correct.
Because I'm afraid of it. But really, once I put it on the container and whatever, it's not as bad as that. And then get rid of it. So.
But if you're being honest with yourself, and I couldn't handle this either, it could run across you and it wouldn't bite you either.
It'd freak me out.
Yes, it would. But I'm saying if it ran across you, it still probably wouldn't bite you either.
It would just think you're a branch.
That's correct. It would just run past you and just move on. It wouldn't.
Yeah.
I've
had a spider go over my foot.
Right. It didn't bite you in the process, did it? It's just what it does with all of us. It freaks us out because we have this illusion that it's that it's 20 foot tall and it's got 8 foot fangs on itself. And
yeah, because we make them look bigger than they really are.
Correct. And I'm not saying I'm not afraid of spiders, and I'm not saying what I mean. I get all that, but using that as the analogy, right?
Yeah.
All right. So we're moving out of that. So we always have to understand that whatever we emphasize, fear or revered, it will automatically start to close itself as a convenient and appropriate form available. Right. So the next section is called energy and form. So we're living with laws. Most people don't understand the laws, so they're not living in harmony most of the time. As we understand the laws and bring our life into harmony with them, things start moving in the right direction. Ralph Waldo Emerson said, the law of cause and effect is the law of laws. So in other words, what you put out comes back. If you give out a lot of good, you're going to receive a lot of good because you're putting yourself in harmony with it. When The Secret, which is sitting over there, came out, it did a lot of good, but it also confused many people. They believe in the law of attraction, think of it and you'll attract it. But most of the people that talk about the law of attraction don't really understand it. The law of attraction is a secondary law. The primary law is the law of vibration. It decrees that everything moves, nothing rests. We live in an ocean of emotion and we think on a frequency. Thought is energy.
Law of vibration, does it say?
Yep. The law of vibration. Decrees that everything moves, nothing rests. Right? Thought is energy. The frequency you're thinking on is going to dictate what you attract to you because it's going to control the vibration that you're in. You can't attract something that you're not in harmony with. If a person is poor, they have no money, they never had any money, and they're thinking about going to get rich, all they ever do is remain in poverty. They're in a poverty vibration. When they understand that and change it, they're in a different world and they're playing a different game. We believe that education is putting information in our heads, but that is not it at all. Maria Montessori, the famous educator, said, we send children to school and we think the cups we want to fill up the cup. The truth is the cups are already full. All the knowledge, all the power there ever was or ever will be is omnipresent. You've already got all the knowledge and the power you'll ever need. You don't get energy. You release it, and you release it to desire. When you've got a desire, you've got the energy to do it. Our spiritual DNA is perfect. There's perfection within every one of us, and that perfection seeks expression itself within and through us. Spirit is always for expansion, for expression. It always shows the essence of who we are as a pure and unadulterated spirit. It always wants to express itself in a greater way. That's why we want things. We actually we don't want to get, we want to grow. I want to run faster. I want to jump higher. Spirit wants to express itself through us. We're spiritual beings. You'll hear people say they're having a spiritual experience. They're not. Their spirit's having a physical experience. The perfection within us is seeking expression all the time. That's why if we run, we want to run faster. We jump, we want to jump higher. If we sell, we want to sell more. It doesn't matter what we do. We've got the desire to do more. We should understand why. All right. All right. So the next section is called creative dissatisfaction.
There's a lot of information in this. Do you know what I mean?
We're only in chapter 1.
I know there's a lot of information considering it's one chapter. Like it's.
He does repeat a lot because he obviously, like you're saying, you need constant spaced repetition to understand something. You do need to go over it multiple times.
Yeah.
So creative dissatisfaction. We should never be satisfied with what we've got. And we always get told you should be satisfied with what you got. You should never be satisfied with what you got. Dissatisfaction is actually a creative state. Because Anne-Marie, if people were satisfied with the first beanie, you'd probably be made out of straw and it's not going to keep your head warm.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So I'm not picking on your beanie because I can just see you.
But
right?
you could be grateful for what you want and dissatisfied. At the same
Correct. You can be, but you got to be careful because when people get too grateful, they stop being creative and they learn to be satisfied with. They say, "Great, yeah, you may not," but a lot of people, when they get very grateful, if you're not careful, then they can get very satisfied with their gratitude, and then they don't become dissatisfied. So, like I said, Anne-Marie, the hat could still be made of straw, and it's probably not going to get you as warm. Straw and mud, and still not going to get you as warm as what a knitted beanie would get you, right? So dissatisfaction is creative, and by wanting more, you're going to do more. It's not a matter of getting it. If you think having more is going to make you better, you're kidding yourself. You're going to be miserably disappointed. It's doing more. You're going to bring more of yourself to the party. That's all I'm doing. I'm just bringing more of me to the surface. I want to do a better job than I did yesterday. All right. It's not about getting. Dissatisfaction and creative state is not about getting. It's about becoming a better version of yourself. It's about increasing all of those sort of things. So we get satisfaction from our work. We go to work for satisfaction. You earn money by providing service. You provide service to earn money. Because he's talking about, obviously, in this scenario, life and why we go to work and all those sort of things. Right. So the next section is called corporations and systems. So he's saying here, let's take a hotel as an example. When you take the people out of a hotel, you don't have a hotel anymore. You have a building full of stuff. The hotel is people. If we want to build a business, we've got to build the people. So everybody has the potential. We've got to learn how to develop that potential. If you want a person to do a better job, you better find out what they want, because the only time they're really going to try to do better is when they're working towards something they really want. Where you've got to want something in order to bring more of yourself to the party. If you don't want it, you're not going to do very much about it in any way, shape, or form. So we tell employees, listen, you've made a mistake. Let me show you how to do this right. But they go back to the way they've been doing the task because they're programmed to do it that way. That's their paradigm. And telling them something isn't going to change it.
What was that sub-chapter called?
This one,
Yeah, sorry.
it's called Corporations and Systems.
Okay.
That's their paradigm, and telling them something isn't going to change it. They may change for today or tomorrow, but then boom, right back to the paradigm. The paradigm is like the thermostat. It controls the temperature of the person's performance. If you want to change the temperature of their performance, you've got to change the paradigm. You have to change that thermostat. And to do that, you have to understand it. You have to start educating people so they start to understand who they are, what they are, and what makes them tick.
So therefore, if you help people get a better understanding of themselves, they're more likely to do better.
Correct. And most people don't understand themselves. Most people don't understand that they've got this massive block that stops them from doing what they're doing. Whether you call it thermostat paradigm, it doesn't matter what you call it, but it's what it is. Most people are very, as Book said, very, very unaware.
So I suppose we're conditioned in a way of doing certain things a certain way.
Correct.
And if you want to change that, you have to change doing that.
Wasn't it that thing where someone always I think, was it Kerr and Ray said it, this thing where they all cook the turkey and they always cut the ends off the turkey.
Correct.
And someone said, why are you cutting the ends off the turkey? And they said, I don't know. And then when they went back and checked, like the great grandmother, it's because they only had a certain size oven. So they cut the ends off the turkey, and
So-
everyone, all the generations were doing it, but they didn't know why.
It's what happens.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Yeah. But we have bigger ovens now, so you don't have to do that. Oh, okay. Fine.
I'll put the turkey story.
I'll take you another step further because it's slowing the process down. Why is the railway gauge in most maybe not so much Australia, but let's say Britain? Why is the railway gauge in Britain the dimensions it is whatever in 3/4, as much as Harry Potter is whatever in 3/4? The railway gauge is a certain dimension and 3/4 of an inch. Do you know why?
I think it was something to do with Germany or something. They didn't want to have the same gauges or something. It was something, right?
So it's the dimensions of the Roman chariot carts, because that was the size of the wheels between a cart that the Romans created. That was the tracks that the Romans created in the thing. And when they dropped railway lines down, that's the dimensions, and no one ever changed it.
Oh, okay.
So it all goes back to because someone did something, but no one went, well, shit, why don't we just make it even at? No. So everything that's ever been produced has been produced by that from the original railway line that went down, which was put in the tracks that the carts used to run up and down, with the Romans run up and down in. It's their carts, because they originally took the cart and put it on a railway line. Crazy, isn't it? That's the way.
I know with Australia, we've actually got 6 different gauges.
That's correct, because obviously at some point in Australia, what would have happened is the same principle. Somebody built a cart here and built a cart there, and they were the main size of the carts, and that's basically what we followed. We followed the tracks of, right?
Yeah.
Crazy. But that's habits, right? Processes of habits. All right, so people don't resist change. They resist being changed. If you decide to change, you'll change. If I decide that you'll change, you didn't, you're going to resist my efforts. We've got to make it appealing to people to want to do better, to change, to be more productive. To do that, we have to understand what makes them tick. We have to understand how their mind functions. Understanding how the mind functions isn't just for psychologists, it's for everybody. because the mind is movement. The body is the manifestation of that movement. So there's a story about Mahatma Gandhi. Someone was coming through a huge crowd of people towards him and handed him a piece of paper saying, "Would you write down some profound idea, message for me to take home?" Gandhi wrote down, "I am my message." If you are the leader, you have to be operating at a vibrational level at which you hope the people around you will operate. You have to be living out your aims for your organization. In the same way, if you want people in the organization to understand themselves, you've got to understand ourselves. We have to be studying with them. So we have to really understand who we are. If we're going to lead people, we've got to do what we want them to do. There is no point in telling people to do something if you're not doing it yourself. It's the same with our children. I can't tell my children to not be on their phone if I'm on my phone.
So lead by example.
Got to lead by example. Got to. I can't tell the kids don't bring the phone to the dinner table if I bring my phone to the dinner table. Use that as a very simple process if you live in the world that we live in today, right? Can't tell my kid to get off the phone if I'm always on it. Can't tell the kid to stop scrolling if I'm always scrolling. You know what I mean?
Can't tell them not to sleep during a movie if you sleep during the movie.
Yeah, sure. Bring stop up. Yeah, I'm trying to use the phone as I'm trying to use the phone as a simple process, right? Because because it's what we have today. You know what I mean? We can't bitch at kids for being on phones if we're always on phones. Just use that as a simplicity, right?
Well, I actually said that too.
I can't
tell you not to be
doing
phone because it is the way of the future in some respects, and it's a tool that you can use. And I use it to build my business, and I'm on it a lot. But I can also regulate myself.
Well, I'll take it another step. I can't tell a child that she should be reading a book if I'm not reading. If I don't read, they don't see me read it. I don't have books around. How do I ask someone else to read? How do I ask someone else to improve? Right. So,
yeah, makes sense.
All right. So understand your program. The paradigm is the most important concept that anyone can study. It controls everything in our lives. If you want to change something, you've got to use repetition. If you'd only been told your name once, you wouldn't even know what it is. They had to call you by your name over and over until finally you started to respond to it. If you just use that as a simple principle. All right? Because really, when you think about that, if you've been called "Hey you" all your life, you'd only answer to "Hey you."
Yeah.
You wouldn't think to answer to anything else, right?
Well, that's like because obviously everyone calls me Shelley, but my
What's your real name?
my real name's Michelle. So sometimes someone will be calling out Michelle, like in a doctor's surgery, not that I go to a doctor's often, and I won't answer because I don't know they'll talk
Not used to it.
talking to me. So yes, that's exactly that.
Yeah. So a lot of the ideas that are controlling people right now are absurd, and they were originated by someone that may have lived maybe 300 or 400 years ago, but they've been passed along in the DNA since then, and they've become part of your DNA. This kept expanding for about 280 days after conception until you made your debut on the planet. Your mind was wide open. Everything that was going on around you went right into your subconscious mind. Most people are starting out behind the 8 ball. That's okay, because you can change that. Right? The human being is a fascinating expression of life. We've got awesome powers locked up within us. If we're going to change, we've got to understand what's involved. If you're going to drive the car, you have to understand what the gear shift is for. You have to understand something about your computer if you're going to work with it. There are programs in our computer, and we rely on them. If we want to program change, we have it done by somebody that writes a code. The paradigm is a program, and it's in your bio computer. The people who wrote the code for the program controlling your life knew nothing about the mind. They were passing along what they'd received. Nevertheless, they installed this program through repetition. We were taught the same things over and over: how to use a spoon, how to walk, how to get one foot in front of the other. It was repetition. Patient, constant, spaced repetition.
Patient,
Spaced, constant, spaced repetition.
Well, that's like a baby learning to walk. It's going to keep falling down, but it has to keep getting itself back up to be able to eventually walk.
Correct.
Which comes down to the repetition of doing that. until
Correct.
we are talking. So yeah.
All right. So the next section is called Attitude, the Magic Word. Attitude is everything. How well anybody will do with this material will depend on their attitude, which is the composite of their thoughts, feelings, and actions. I've listened to a record of Earl Nightingale's, which is a magnificent essay on attitude called The Magic Word. Over and over, perhaps
Is that
10.
the one you've got?
Yeah, I have listened to it a couple of times. Haven't
Yeah.
listened to it that many times, obviously. Over and over, perhaps 10,000 times. The magic word is attitude. By repeatedly listening to this record, I become aware of what attitude is. Then I became aware of my own attitude. I became aware that I had a bad attitude about who I was and what I was capable of doing. I had to become aware first of what attitude actually is, and then I had to become aware of how to change it. I changed it the way it was built. Somebody else had built it through repetition. Because what Earl had to say about attitude went against everything I had ever been taught up to that point. I would listen to the same record over and over again. I have a copy of Napoleon Hill, Think and Grow Rich, bound in black leather. I've been reading this particular copy every day since 1963. I started reading this book when I was 26. My sister Helen, 2 years older than me, had a friend named Pat, and Pat was a reader. She always had books. She always had a book with her. I think Pat read everything in the local library. Think and Grow Rich was the first book I ever read. When I was first given this book, I said I can't read. That wasn't true. I could not read well, but I could read about as well as most people at a 7th grade level. Think and Grow Rich. I read that one book for a long time. I was doing what's required to change a paradigm. I didn't know that. I wasn't doing it deliberately. I was just fascinated with what I was reading. Pat thought that was strange behavior. She'd read a book and go on to another one. Pat was well educated because she read so many books, but she didn't even know herself. She was a maintenance person, and she and her husband had nothing. They never got anywhere. They never accomplished anything in their lives. They just got by. God's highest form of creation, and they just got by. So when you read a book through a second time, you don't see something in the book that wasn't there before. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before. The repetition creates the awareness. Like I said, this is the 29th reading of this book from my point of view. All right. And I can tell you, even, and I'm not telling you anybody that's listening or Anne-Marie that's listening, you can read this book as many times as you want. Doesn't mean I can tell you that I'm still not doing some of the things that it says in this book. I still can't break my own mental habits from time to time. I've become very aware of it, though, very aware of it. Very, very aware of what I do or don't do, more to the point. But, you know what I mean? Every now and again, you know what I mean? And I generally, what I do at the moment, I have this book and I have a couple of others, and I pick them up, and because I can read this chapter we're reading now on my own in about 20 minutes. So I might read a chapter of this and a chapter of something else every day. I'm reading another book at the moment, which will probably be our next book in the book club, Anne-Marie, which we'll get to in a minute. Every day, and to try and just keep the awareness coming through, because it reminds me every day, yep, I'm off track. I'm not doing what I'm doing, because habits are so important. All right, can I move on? Shelley's just reading.
I just need to agree to this here.
So what do you want to write?
So when you read a good book a second time, you don't see. So
you don't see something in the book that wasn't there. You see something in yourself that wasn't there before. Because I'll ask you, Anne-Marie, how many times do you read a book and don't pick it back up? Most.
Any classic books, I've read them once and then I've moved on to another one.
Correct.
Right, compared to most probably.
And
I
understand that with a novel that's a story. Do you know what I mean? You may want to read it once and move on. And I do understand, like you can see behind us, it's a whole stack of books. There's plenty of books that I've read once and I probably have no intention to ever pick it back up again, because it's not where I am. But there's plenty of books that you'll read again. It might be a year later or 2 years later, and then you go, I didn't pick that up the first time around. But certain books like this, which is really easy to read, this is a very easy version of Think and Grow Rich. This book is a simple version to read. Very simply, easy to read, and has all the primary, like Shelley just said, has all the primary stuff. And we're only in chapter 1. Got so much stuff just in chapter 1. Can I turn the page yet? Right, so we're nearly finished, last page. So we have to create awareness that what we are doing, our habitual behavior, is not producing the results we want. And that's the biggest thing we've got to look at. If we're not getting the results we want, it's because we have this habit that's not allowing us to go any further. We have to become aware of how to change our behavior, and we have to change it the same way we have built it, through repetition. Read the same book, listen to the same recording. If you listen to Earl's recording of the magic word for a couple of times a day for 6 months, I guarantee you'll be actually aware of your attitude. And although it sounds simple, it will change your life. That's the end of the chapter for now. Okay. Anything you want to discuss? Cool.
That was good info. So that was like
Shelley wrote lots of notes.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pages of notes. That's right. From that.
Mm-hmm.
Thought that
Well,
was
it's
pretty
sort of like in depth, and it gets you sort of like thinking. So
Yes.
it's like, and I suppose, yeah, keeping on rereading it, you are going to get something different every single time.
Well, you can't see it because it's in pencil, but if I flip what I just read, everything I read is underlined. So you've got the book in front of you. You saw I didn't miss a lot of the chapter, but it's pretty well underlined, most of it. All right.
Yeah.
Otherwise, there's a few sections that I put just a little dash and a dash underneath. So read that paragraph because I read it multiple times. I started to underline it, and then as you read the chapter again, you start to underline it. Eventually, go, okay, this book almost is underlined the whole book. It's one of those style of books.
So do you think you're aware of your attitude?
Oh, definitely. I know I've got a bad attitude. I'll admit that. It sucks at times.
Are you aware of your attitude?
Sometimes I can be like in a bad mood, for instance. So it's like trying to change that attitude. It's like I know that I've got to change it back to something better, because it's not going to help if I'm being in a bad mood. So.
But if you look at, and I know you're still recording, so you can send this out to people. If you look at most people, we don't achieve anything, or we're not getting to where we want to be, and it's because we just continue to follow the same pattern, the same results. We don't do what's required.
We need to just develop that awareness. Right?
Yeah, we don't do what's required, right? And we keep repeating that pattern over and over and over. If you looked at what you do, like I watched the girls the other day, about to turn 14 and 16, their first process, yes, they get up and go to the toilet. And then they walk straight from the toilet, straight to where their phones are sitting at here on a charger, and check to see if anybody messaged them. That's their process before they do anything else. They can't help themselves. It's a habit, right? Let alone whatever else you do. And if you think about what most of us do, how often can you wake up and not touch the phone?
No.
I can.
Right? So, but why do you touch the phone?
Well, the alarm goes off, so I have to touch it.
Sure, but okay. but it's what you do, right?
Yeah.
And you probably get up and you go out into the other room and you turn the TV on. Yeah. Or whatever you do, right?
I think that's really good info. So I'll probably make sure I read through this as well as reading the book.
Sure.
So what next? Chapter 2, which will be next Tuesday.
It's are you living in someone else's paradigm?
So create the world you want.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Okay.
That's cool. So I'm happy with that. So that's our very first book club session. So that went for 50 minutes.
Yeah.
Just cool.
Yeah, like I said, I read the chapter this morning before because I hadn't read it. I was admittedly reading this book every single day for months on end, and then eventually I moved on to a slightly different book, and I probably read it every morning at the moment, and I just pick this one up every now and again. So I made sure I read the chapter this morning. But like I said, I've read it 28 times. I originally was going to read it until come up with some crazy number, and then I thought, well, that's crazy. So, but I use this a lot if I'm doing quotes or stuff and bits and pieces. I come back to this because it's a simple format, and it's a reminder in a simple format.
Well, this is my first reading of it because I'm reading The Obstacle is the Way at the moment by Ryan Holiday. So I think it's great. So, and look, we can do more discussions or discuss as we're going. I think to encourage journaling is great. And obviously then encourage people to get their own copies so they can go through and underline and or highlight if need be as well. So I think that's pretty good.
Yeah, well, I feel that when you force yourself to underline or highlight, underline more so, it forces you to slow down and really read that section and why did you underline it? What's the prominence in it? And then when you do go back and underline, sometimes you'll underline a section and then you'll go back and you know what I mean? All right. So, right. Do you wish to stop recording?
Yes.
So we'll just stop recording.
So thank you, everyone. I hope you enjoy this recording if you're listening to the recording.
Not end. Not end.
Oops, sorry. I go back.